Cool. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining. And sorry for a bit of a wait. There were some technical issues, but we are here and we are live. So with me, I have the team from Hunch. And I'm in the very interesting position where I have very little info. Oh, geez, sorry. It started streaming on the YouTube thing. That happens. I have the YouTube link up in a different tab, and I just start getting audio, hearing myself. But okay, cool. Let's try this again. Man, this is going to be a rough one, but let's go. So I actually don't know that much about Hunch. I don't know that much about kind of their product and so forth. But Joshua, who is very involved with the FedSA stuff, he said like we really need to chat to these guys in terms of kind of they're building apparently something really cool, and chat a bit about kind of like just like the product design around it and technical considerations specifically around like building something with AI and so forth. And like he mentioned, there's a very interesting conversation to be had there. So I'm actually going into this blind, meaning that I'm probably going to figure the things out like with the rest of you guys. But we've had a couple of those, and like they tend to be pretty good though. Cool. So I think diving straight into it, not wasting any time. I don't know if you guys maybe want to go around, kind of just introduce yourselves individually before we chat a bit about Hunch, and maybe also kind of like what your technical background is as well individually. Yeah, Dave. So I assume you want to start.
Yeah, I'm happy to start, and I'll kind of Ross and Alex can talk a little bit about themselves maybe, but I'll kind of talk also about like how we kind of know each other and work together. So I'm David. I'm one of the co-founders along with Ross and Alex of Hunch. I'm also the CEO. I kind of mainly work on kind of product and product design now, but I started out actually my first kind of real job was with Ross and I was working as a kind of front-end engineer at a life insurance startup. Ross was working as the back-end engineer. But we met kind of a few years before that. We started working together in high school, modding video games, and then doing other things, building websites and like working on basically all kinds of different projects. And then we about 10 years ago, founded a company called Cape Networks, which we built hardware and then lots of software, kind of full stack, everything from like on-device hardware to kind of cloud software and like kind of quite nice like user interfaces for network engineers and network managers to understand how their enterprise networks were performing and to help them fix issues with their networks. And Alex joined us very early on in that journey as the second employee. And I can talk a little bit more about that, but basically. Cape ended up being acquired by Hewlett-Packard Enterprise and became one of their fastest growing products in their portfolio.
Sorry to interrupt you. They're called Aruba today, right?
That's right. So Aruba is the business unit within HPE that acquired us. So Aruba is a $4 billion business. It's one of the biggest enterprise networking companies. Kind of alongside Cisco and others, and kind of one of the things with Aruba is that it's got more of a presence now in Cape Town because that was our team that was acquired that started the Cape Town office, and it's it's a company that takes networking kind of really seriously. Everyone who really cares about their networks runs Aruba. It took like the White House, the Pentagon. Like Microsoft and Google, a lot of the biggest companies and organizations with the toughest network kind of environments run Aruba. Anyway, that was already a long intro, but it was kind of like the intro into kind of starting Hunch as well. But I'll maybe let Ross just talk about himself. And
That's great, and it just shows again like how small the tech world actually is. Because I know a ton of people there. I know Laura, Grant, a couple of the people there. So okay, that's very interesting. Yeah, cool. Ross, you want to give a bit of an overview of who you are?
Yeah, sure. So like David said, we've known each other and worked together for a really long time. I've kind of always worked on back-end stuff, not much of a front-end engineer. Apart from Dave mentioned we worked on some websites together. I think that did the trick of putting me off forever. That was kind of early 2000s. So obviously everything was quite different then. Like cross-browser compatibility was even worse than it is now. It was horrible. So yeah, mostly back-end development. A lot of database stuff as well. Data was a big part of the previous product, and that was I can't remember what the figures ended up being, but it was sort of in the millions of requests per second coming in. We kind of streamed from our sensors. So yeah, a lot of back-end development experience, primarily with Python more recently.
It's interesting that David mentioned, kind of like mods and websites and stuff. Most people I know have started their journey into software by creating like Half-Life or Warcraft 3 mods, or built like websites for their band. In like Dreamweaver or whatever. Like that's 80% of the industry, like right there, the entry point into software. Yeah.
I think Ross did both. Ross also.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
Websites for the band.
Yeah. I was rocking that Microsoft front page back in the day. Cool, Alex. You want to give a bit of an overview of who you are?
Hey, sure. Hi, guys. I, as I mentioned, I met Russ and Dave in the previous startup. So we've been working together about, I think 8 years now. But I started, my foray into software, I guess, was first when I studied engineering. I studied mechatronics at UCT, and the software part always felt like the one that wasn't any work. So after that, I started my career in software, and I've been a back-end developer, front-end, full stack, and things in between. But really settled on front-end development the last almost decade. So I'd say that's probably my focus these days. A lot of React these days, kind of enjoy it.
Nice, cool. So I think we can dive a bit into. So David, I think you have some slides, and we can dive a bit into that. Give us like a very high level overview of what Hunch is, and then I'm super curious to kind of get a bit into some of the technical discussion and so forth.
Yeah, I think very few slides, and we can just rip through them. But it's we can show a quick demo as well to help kind of get a sense of what it is.
Sure.
But before we get into that, it may be helpful. Just spending 2 or 3 minutes. Let me see if this is...
Also, I just want to, I think if you press present, it should pull it up. I also just want to mention if anyone has any questions, like you're more than welcome to just pop them in the text chat, and I'll just kind of throw them on the screen here so the people watching, and then we can get to them.
Great. Let me just make sure that is this actually going to work. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay.
I see a visual interface.
That's right. That's right. So that's what Hunch is. It's a visual high bandwidth interface to get work done with any AI model. And I'll just kind of skip ahead. So something that you should know about it. It's in private beta at the moment. We're actually seeing like 85+% month on month, increase in usage over the last couple of months, which is really exciting for us. But if anyone wants access who's on this call, just email us here, and anyone kind of who emails us in the next half an hour, 45 minutes, whatever, we'll give you access right away. And here are a couple of useful URLs to check out as well. Feel free to join our Discord. We've got a bunch of really great people on there. And kind of the lead up is that GPT-4 is really incredible. It was an incredible technology breakthrough, and its capability really is like similar to that of like a knowledgeable intern, but because it's software, it's effectively infinite interns, bounded really only by compute, power, cost. And even though chat is very, very easy to try, it means that even though you have effectively infinite interns, you can only text with them one at a time, essentially. So the way we kind of see ChatGPT is that it's a really linear interface. It's fairly low bandwidth. I mean, this is not bashing ChatGPT. We love it. We use it. But it also kind of only allows you to use OpenAI's models, and we have a ton of other models being available kind of all the time. In the last couple of weeks, you had the Anthropic Claude 3 models. Opus is amazing. I mean, it's probably now the premier model. It's certainly really great at writing, and even the Haiku, which is Claude 3 Haiku, which is the smallest model, is like really good. It's surprisingly good. It's super fast as well, and it's really cheap. And then you have all the Mistral models, which is kind of emerging as the like open source standard for AI models. You have Stability with also kind of launching new AI kind of image generation models. 11 Labs, which does voice cloning. You have all the Google Gemini models. You have a ton of different models, and they're all kind of sharded across these different surface areas today. And then you have the issue that useful work that you do in ChatGPT is kind of hard to reuse. It's kind of hard to share. And Hunch, on the other hand, is a spatial canvas. We designed it to try and be as high bandwidth as possible, so you can really get the most out of any AI model. So you can connect and combine different AI models to do different things. And then the work that you do is kind of inherently reusable and shareable as sort of tools or new even kind of skills to level up your team. And there are two main constructs in Hunch, which I'll show you in just a second. So the first is a canvas, which is a workspace to think and work with AI. And what that canvas allows you to do is you break down complex work into manageable steps. And just like you wouldn't give an intern a whole project to do in one shot, AI models do reliably better when you give them smaller tasks to do. The other thing that the canvas allows for is connecting and combining different AI models. So you can use GPT-4 Vision, Gemini Vision to understand a whiteboard image. You can use GPT-4 or Opus Claude Opus to brainstorm different ideas. You can use Stable Diffusion or DALL-E to generate illustrations for them, and so on. And then perhaps kind of most importantly, you can experiment and iterate really, really quickly. And that's important because all of these models are really non-deterministic, and you really just don't know what you're going to get out of them for the instructions that you give them. And so you need to use trial and error to get to the right flow of models, of prompts, and to get the work done that's like most useful. But then what you can do is you can publish a canvas as a tool, which you can share with your team. You can share with the community. I'll actually show you a community tool that's really cool that someone published a few weeks ago. And that tool can just be reused really easily. So let me get into the demo quickly. Sorry, we've got a whole of mirrors here. But should I pause there, Skalk, or can I dive into a demo?
Yeah, let's do a demo. I already have a ton of questions lined up, but yeah, let's do a demo.
Awesome. So this is the homepage of Hunch when you log in at the moment. You can use any of these tools that you may have built or that have been shared with your team or the community. What I'm actually going to do is just start with a new canvas. and you can kind of see some of the blocks that are available. I'm just going to create a new block here, just with some information in it. And what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to send the information from this block to a whole lot of different models, so we can see how different models compare. It's sort of like a kind of a basic thing that you can do with Hunch, but it's like really, it's quite interesting to see the capabilities of different models kind of stacked up against each other. So I'm going to basically say, write 10 sentences that end with the word Apple. And this content block is really just inert. It's like a value store. What we can do is we can send that to a GPT-4 turbo block. I'm going to put auto run on. So what that happens is that this block will essentially just run whatever information we pass it. And you can see here that what we're doing is we're passing it the sentences here. So I'm just going to call this instruction instead of Apple sentences. There we go. Let's make this bigger. Now we can actually view this in like kind of a full screen mode to see what's happening. Most of them have actually do end with Apple, but this turns out this is a really quite a tough task for LLMs. We have one over here that doesn't end in Apple, another one, all right, and a third one. So what we can do is we can see how this compares to some other models. I'm going to choose GPT 3.5. Okay, you can see this GPT 3.5 is much faster and also less successful. We have one that ends in Apple. I'm just going to duplicate this block again and change the model to Claude 3 Opus. And let's see how this does. I haven't actually done this test before with Opus. Opus is really slow. So what I'm going to do at the same time is just duplicate this again, but change this to Haiku, which is really fast. And at any point, what I can do is switch over to this preview mode. And this is what this canvas would look like if we were to publish it as a tool. So you can see that there's an instruction as the input, and then a bunch of these text outputs over here. They're in the right order, but maybe just to make it easier, I'll rename this. So this is Haiku, this is Opus, this is 3.5, and this is 4. Okay, so we've looked at both of these. Let's look at Opus. It did pretty well, and Haiku is kind of somewhere in between. A bunch of them are Apple and some of them aren't. Anyway, so this is just a kind of a toy example, but what's quite cool is that we can actually replace this with something else. So we can say something like Sophie has 2 cars, last year she sold 3 cars. How many cars does Sophie have? And this is also something that some models struggle with. We can see basically how fast Haiku is and how wrong it can be. And likewise for GPT 3.5, so Sophie, okay, according to GPT-4, has 0 cars. I don't know if Opus is going to get better. Okay, this is stymied all of them. But in any case, like this is like a kind of a useful way of just like repeating multiple tasks, like with different models. If you want to, you can connect up different models and pass the values to each other, which is what I'm going to do now. I'll just show you like really quickly another example that's a little bit more sophisticated. Someone in our community put together this tool, a product name generator, and what they I'm going to go down to this, actually we can see that the outputs that are created with this like product description, a cool inventory management SaaS, and these are the examples. These are the outputs that like the names that it suggests. If you've ever tried to get GPT-4 or ChatGPT to generate names for something, it comes up with like absolutely like ludicrous ideas, and by breaking that task down, that task of naming, into subtasks, which you can see over here, finding different word associations, emotional associations, etc., and then kind of clustering them together and then coming up with names is much more effective. And we can just customize this to look at the insights of this tool. So what we have here is this detailed product description that the tool maker put in initially. It's a description of a gardening app, and we have all of the different sort of tasks that broke down over here, and then it's kind of resulted in clustering and name suggestions. But what's really cool is that we can take this tool, this logic that this person put together, and just create additional functionality here. So we can basically say, write an app store description. Okay. But just like, if you were to ask an intern to write an app store description, the answer, what they might come up with might be good, it might be, not so good. But if you ask them to first think about what, who is the target market for this app? So who is the target customer? Let me zoom in a little bit. I'm probably really small here. What are their main pain points? How does this app benefit them? Okay, and we just told to output bullets. And what we'll do is pass this into this App Store description. And what will happen is that this will rewrite the description with the customer pain points and benefits in mind, and it will result in a much better description for us. We can continue to build on this. We can basically say like, okay, like let's generate some images and for this app. We can some concept art, break this down into tweets and other announcements, and continue to work in one workspace with all these different models to do basically whatever we want. I feel like I've been talking for a long time, so I'm just gonna take a pause here. I'm happy to come back to this.
This is amazing stuff. Wow, like I'm kind of glad I went into this blind, because like I like my sense of being impressed here is real. Luca actually mentioned like a really cool, like clean interface.
Thanks,
and yeah, and I like that's also something that struck me is like some of these AI tools tend to they're clearly built by developers. So sure, man, I have so many questions. Like so there's a bunch of questions just about the subject, the domain itself, and then obviously there's a lot of questions around the product design side, like so it's like, how do you actually build a product around like all these, because at the end of the day like all that it's doing is you have all these endpoints and you're just providing a way to more easily manage your interactions with these endpoints. Like basically you can do most of this through something like just a bash script or something as well, but like obviously that's not that like accessible and usable. So I think first and foremost, like from just purely from a UI design perspective and a user experience perspective, it's a quite a novel way using a product. So we're very used to kind of SaaS products having kind of like this CRUD like interface where it's like, okay, you have a list of things and you add something, you can delete something, you can edit something, cool, and then you have categories and you look. But kind of what you guys have here is a very uncommon way of actually engaging with data through the web or through a web app. So I'm curious what the iteration cycle was on that, and like how you guys ended up with what you have now. Also, I just want to ask: is it using, because that looks very like React Flow? Are you guys using React Flow in the background?
Yes, yes, we are.
I've done a couple of React Flow projects, and all I can say is condolences. It can get very angry very quickly.
We need a master like Alex to figure this out.
So I'm curious kind of like what the process was in terms of figuring out, okay, there's this idea of a way to write effectively, I guess, scripts and with a GUI. Like, what was that process like in terms of arriving at where you guys are now?
Yeah, it was kind of a long process. So we founded what became Hunch like quite a while ago, well over a year ago, and we initially were building a data analysis product. I'd worked kind of as a management consultant, and I have a real interest in kind of data analysis and data visualization. And I think that the three of us, like, what kind of distinguishes our work together. And there are two other people on this team who kind of joined us in the last year. Ricardo, who's a product designer, and Ross MacArthur, who's a backend engineer. Both of them are really great. But I think what distinguishes the kinds of projects that attracts us is something where there's an opportunity for a new kind of way of interacting with data and with like, these kind of systems, like to like talk in a really abstract way. Like that really is what we did with Cape as well. Even though we built it was very kind of technical startup, and networking and hardware and all sorts of other stuff. Really, what ended up kind of being the defining feature of the product was a very simple and easy to use dashboard that people could learn very easily, that it was very obvious what was happening. You didn't have to kind of get training in the product to figure it out. So we really love challenges and are drawn to challenges like that. And when like I said, we kind of went down the road of building a really fast and visual way of interacting with quantitative data. And then GPT-4 came out. We realized that, like, okay, even though we've been using GPT-3 as in the product for like almost a year at that point, and kind of had integrated it quite a lot into how the product worked behind the scenes, GPT-4 really was like such a quantum leap forward. It became clear that, like, okay, people are going to be talking to systems, like talking to their data, especially people who are like occasional users, and where are the limits here? What's really like kind of the hard problem to solve, given the capability of like today's generation of models, and like possibly future generations as we kind of saw them. And we did a lot of prototyping and realized that, like, there's so much more that people need to be able to do with these models than they can do with just like a chat interface. And that's kind of like how we got started. And we're a distributed team, but I'm based in San Francisco, and Ross and Alex are mainly in Cape Town. Ricardo, our designer, splits his time between Germany and Brazil. But we all came together for a week and a half in the middle of last year in Cape Town, and kind of locked ourselves in a house, and barely left it, which Ricardo was very frustrated about. He wanted to go to the beach and he could never go. And we just kind of had hashed it out. And by the end of that time, we had the start of the product that's obviously continued to evolve, but really like the main building blocks were kind of there from then.
So I'm curious. So, for example, there's a couple of questions from people watching as well, and I'll pull them on the screen here in a second. But from my side, so obviously GPT-4 and those things, there's do you need to provide your own API key, or how does that work?
At the moment, you just join the product, no API keys.
Oh, really?
Use ours. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We handle all of that. So to make it as easy as possible. I mean,
okay.
I mean, it's partly an answer to your previous question as well, in that, we wanted to make this. We wanted to make a tool that wasn't only for kind of developers or engineers or that you didn't have to be super technical to kind of use it. That it would make sense to the average knowledge worker, product manager, business analyst, sales engineer, whatever. It's like, there's a ton of people out there who could really do a lot more than they do today with the sort of help of AI. And we wanted to just kind of put that into their hands. And this was the best way we could figure out to do that.
Yeah, cool. So then we have a question from Ross, not Ross on the call, another Ross. Do you see Hunch as being specifically useful or powerful in certain sectors or use cases? I think that's a really great question. Yeah.
Yeah, that is a great question.
And you're allowed to say for writing college essays. I think we could just state the obvious right here.
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't know how much of that there is at the moment. I think there's a bunch of people using it to customize their CVs and write job applications.
I've seen some stuff on LinkedIn. I actually took a screenshot of it where there was that that thing that ChatGPT does where it leaves the square brackets where you need to insert your own stuff, and they left in mention here about your achievements throughout the year.
Nice.
Yeah. So no, I have to say, as someone who up until recently was very involved in tertiary education and still is to a lesser degree. No, it's rampant and most places don't know what to do about it. So but that's a completely different discussion, and I have some strong views on that, so let's not get into that.
Yeah.
Right. Yes.
But to answer Ross's question, we actually use our product to help kind of look at just the structure and kind of headings of what is the processes that are being kind of run to in an automated and kind of to provide anonymized data. And you would not believe the range of use cases. It's really unbelievable. And we're seeing, I think it generally falls into a few different buckets. There's people who take a lot of information and synthesize and summarize that. So whether that's academic information or call transcripts or whatever the case might be, and turn that into something digestible or really synthesized. Then there's people who are taking little bits of information, little ideas, and brainstorming them out and writing, generating a lot of information out of it. And then there's people using it to kind of transpose or transform stuff. So an example, we've got quite a few podcasters using it where they'll put in a podcast transcript, and then you can actually just drop the audio file in and we'll transcribe it, because you can use Whisper and DeepGram to transcribe those things, and then find the most interesting pieces of the transcript, and from there generate heading ideas or title ideas for the podcast, show notes, tweets, blog posts, so you're taking one piece of content and really transforming it into a lot of other pieces.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I have to say as well is I think the reason why I'm so kind of impressed by what you've just showed me is one part of the puzzle that I feel that like about like AI and knowledge work in general, like I'm very involved in the world of product design and so forth. So, you have that idea of like the double diamond and all that stuff. So you have ideation and then you kind of have refinement. And like the current generation of AI tooling is amazing for ideation. Like maybe even to a fault insofar that it just gives you random stuff that's not even like related. But it really sucks to refine that. And this is what I really like is kind of like there's also a comment here. I'm trying to let me get into this like in a second, but like I think Ruan also mentioned, like kind of I don't know if this is a question or whether this is a statement. Like, would you say this is a fair analysis?
It wasn't like a conscious thing, and it just so happened to be the case that like we laying out different blocks or tasks spatially is a really open-ended and flexible way to do both the kind of ideation and to bring together and synthesize ideas and sort of stuff like that. And so it wasn't like an intentional thing of like, okay, well, we're going to make Miro with AI or FigJam with AI or something like that. It was more just like, it happens to be they're both kind of canvas-based interfaces, and I think what's nice is like tools like Miro and FigJam and all the others help people kind of get used to this like 2D way of working and thinking.
Yeah, I'd actually say it's actually less related than one would think, because I think like whereas FigJam and Miro and those things are mostly for organizing data, I think what you guys have is more about organizing behavior. And so if you look at even something like Scratch, you guys are probably familiar with Scratch, like kind of the programming language. They use it to teach kids to program and so forth. It's also the same type of thing. It's like you drag, you do your conditional logic, you do your kind of functions, and it teaches you computer science principles, but you kind of drew through like a flow chart. And even if you think about something like I think it's pronounced Zapier, just kind of like also like it also has the same type of thing where you have like, okay, cool, if I receive an email, then send a Slack notification, and it kind of uses the same principle as well, where it's like these things and you connect them. And I actually think it's a very intuitive way to describe behavior. I actually think it's a much more intuitive way to describe behavior than actual mind map is to describe data, because we do think about behavior as movement, as from here to there, then here, and it splits and so forth. It's really cool. So the other question I have is, like, I wasn't 100% sure about that. I couldn't pick it up from the demo, but does it support like conditional logic? So where you can say that if this gets returned, then do this, otherwise do something else?
It effectively does. We don't have like the conditional logic blocks at this point. We thought that would be one of the first things that we'd have to build. I mean, you mentioned Scratch. We also kind of see the sort of visual, programming languages at least at the beginning were more like a direct inspiration than something like Miro or
Yes.
But we actually haven't. We haven't actually felt like the need to implement them, because you can encapsulate a lot of that logic in the blocks themselves, because the blocks are smart. So you can say things like, if in the instructions, if this is what's happened, do this, and if it doesn't, then do that, as opposed to adding more artifacts.
Yeah. So there's no formalized way to do it, but you can do it by means of the prompt itself. Yeah.
I suspect we'll do that at some point, but not at this stage. We do have other really interesting. I didn't show it, but we have some really interesting abstractions. One of them is a batch process, which allows you to take any list and split it up into multiple parallel pipelines of work. So you can take, for example, like your something I did recently is it took a long list of like 100 different places in the US and evaluated them based on like a rubric which GPT-4 Turbo had created to kind of see how livable are they, like how much do they match against the sort of criteria that's someone I was talking to had, and then from that evaluation to get an output, and it does all of those kind of in parallel. So it's a huge amount of work being done very, very quickly. Another abstraction is like a Python code runner, so you can run code in the block. Ross could demo that if you wanted to.
That would be amazing. I actually wanted to ask, like where if I assume because it's just using like the GPT model, you can ask it to return code. Does it do like code formatting, syntax highlighting, those type of things as well?
Ross, over to you.
Oh, I would love to see that. All right.
Cool. Let me try and clear the first hurdle of screen sharing.
Yes, present would be the big button.
Yeah, happy to talk about our tech stack and all of that.
Yeah.
I have a slide with like the full stack that I'm happy to share. But,
nice, yeah. So I think maybe just before Ross digs into it, I think one thing I'm super interested in is, so you kind of showed this example where someone built this pipeline to create like company names, if I remember correctly. So is that something you can export and import? Is that something you can share? Can you share like pipelines and scripts and stuff with people? Like, is it like, can you do that through like a JSON file or
you can share. You can share like you would share, a Notion doc or a Google Doc kind of thing. As you can share these tools that are created. So you can share it just with, via a link, or with everyone in your organization, or with the whole community. And so that's, you can also kind of create a JSON schema and import and export those as well.
Okay, cool. So then the other thing is as well is, have you guys tried web scraping with this?
All right, I'm really going to hand over to Ross now.
Oh yeah,
so I can do that next.
Because I just want to say, the reason I'm asking is I do a ton of web scraping, and mentally I do this process just by means of here's a node file. Okay, here's my Figma board with everything. Like if like this can do web scraping, like that would be amazing. But yeah, blow my mind, Ross.
Let me show you. I can show you. Should I show you this first, or web scraping first? I can show you this first. So this is a pretty simple canvas I just put together earlier today, just to kind of try out some of the vision stuff and some of our code running stuff. So the starting point is like a really not great whiteboard wireframe. So something you guys are probably very familiar with. So I'm using GPT-4 Vision to have a look at that and figure out how to write it as HTML. So it's a really simple instruction, basically just saying, use Tailwind, use a CDN URL, and make me HTML for this UI. That obviously results in an explanation of what it's doing and then a chunk of HTML. So I'm extracting the actual HTML again. So this one's using Haiku because, as David said, it's really fast and cheap. In this block, I've got a bunch of code. So this is code that was written by GPT-4. I turned it into a content node just because I wanted to tweak it after it was generated. And this is using Selenium to save the HTML to a temporary file, open it in headless Firefox, take a screenshot, and return that screenshot. So then running that in the code runner, this is the output that we get. So this is the kind of UI that GPT-4 constructed based on this content block. So it's done a pretty reasonable job, I think, given that it's just using off-the-shelf elements and everything. So I then got it to kind of critique the styling. It didn't do a great job of that. All it did was change the progress bar to green. So I need to put a bit more time into the instruction. Yeah, the instruction was basically just like, how can it be improved, list the improvements. So this is where the ability to iterate on stuff quite quickly comes in handy, because the first attempt is often like, yeah, okay, it made the progress bar green. That's not really what I had in mind. Yeah, so a little bit of the technical details. So for the code runner, we're actually using a service called Modal. So we run a sandboxed, completely isolated container that gets spun up and destroyed for every execution of code. It's still reasonably quick. So I can show you, I guess I can pause there. Do you have any questions at the moment, or should I switch to web scraping? You're muted.
No, this is really cool. Yeah, and obviously those are limitations on the actual underlying model. So what's really cool is like your actual product is not the model, but a way to interact with the model. So obviously, as the models get better, like by definition, your product will also become more useful. This is really cool. Yeah. So okay. So when you're saying write code, you're saying so you program Hunch.
In this case, it's just writing standard Python code. So this is just regular Python code. The only restriction is that it needs like an entry point. So it needs to be either a single function, or it can be multiple functions, and then you just need to indicate it with a comment which function is the entry point.
Yeah. So my question was in relation to, I think you mentioned like you kind of have a sandbox environment.
Yeah. So that's
related to this.
Yeah. So the sandbox environment is basically just a Python Docker image essentially that gets built on demand.
Oh, I see.
The code, just so that it's completely isolated from a security perspective.
Oh, I see. Okay, so it can actually execute the code for you.
Yeah. So
okay, I thought okay. So it doesn't just do a static analysis on it.
Sorry. I think I just sped through this. So what this is doing,
I didn't realize that.
Actually executing
really
this
cool.
code. I can rewrite.
And that happens on the Hunch side, right?
Yeah.
So that's before it gets passed through to the models.
Yeah. So this is here. It's finding the entry point. It's figuring out how to map the arguments to the actual code that's been provided, and then it's running this. Yeah, in an isolated sandbox, and something that this can do, the code interpreter. So obviously OpenAI have code interpreter, which is kind of built into GPT chat, and that can execute code. One advantage that we have over that is that we can do arbitrary dependencies, and the code has web access, neither of which are the case with ChatGPT. So you can do just about anything in this. We've had people do some really incomprehensible things with it, with kind of, as you said, like your question about the if this then that, people built some crazy flow control stuff,
logic gates,
the code executor. Just about.
So. Okay, cool.
Yeah. What might not be obvious is that these different blocks are not only can they be different models, but some of them are kind of doing totally different things. So in this example, this code runner block, it's not actually using any AI models itself. It's just taking in code. You can write the code in the block. You can pass in code, which is what Ross is doing from somewhere else, another block, which could be static, or that could be generated by like GPT-4 or whatever. And then that code runner block, all it's doing is it's just creating the sandbox, running the code, and destroying it afterwards, and kind of showing you whatever output you've asked for.
Oh, that's really, really cool. There's another question here from Ross. So he says, what kind of context limits are there on a single canvas?
Yeah, so the way that it works is basically the context is very explicitly configured by the user. So all of these arrows represent the flow of data into different nodes. So I guess maybe for anyone who's not aware of what context actually is in this context, is you have a limited number of what are called tokens that an AI model can kind of ingest and make sense of. And that's in the case of GPT-4, I think it's 32,000 tokens. In the case of Anthropic, it's 200,000 tokens with Claude 3.
Yeah, and I know
that's essentially words.
That's the main selling point of Anthropic, is like their tokens are just, so people use it for things like transcription and so forth. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a huge amount of context. So you do have very fine-grained control over that context. You can open up a block and see, okay, the content that we're passing in is 772 tokens. You can look at the HTML output and see that that's 640 tokens. So, I mean, if you think of 200,000 tokens, and this is 640 tokens, you can do quite a lot with the amount of context available, and it's also it's very easy to control. David, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, so just to Ross's question, I mean, that like for a canvas itself, there's no real limit. I'm saying that, I mean, they're kind of, at some point there's probably a performance limit, but we've seen people with 150 plus blocks on a single canvas. Kind of, we've taken it higher than that, but that's like what like users are actually doing. Like one of them is doing like academic research with it, and that's like pulling in a ton of data and synthesizing a ton of data. So there's no real like theoretical limits of or like in principle limit on the canvas itself. It's just a limit per model.
Yeah. Okay, that's really, really cool. Then there was another question I had, but it kind of, I think I was so enthralled by what I saw now that it completely escaped me. I don't know if there's anything else worth adding or mentioning or showing. I would actually like to get a bit into the tech stack if there isn't anything else.
Yeah,
I can show you the web scraper quickly. It's a work in progress. So this is kind of my scratch pad where I was doing some stuff.
Yeah, so and the reason I'm asking is because I've had limited success with web scraping with GPT and so forth. Sometimes it just completely goes off the rails. Yeah.
So this is I think I had a better example previously. If you can get it to give you, let me find something terrible. So I think recipes are a pretty good candidate for this sort of thing. Because if you've ever looked at a recipe online, it's like there's a lot of setup about how great this recipe is going to be.
I actually have some students last year for like that. I had them. I also scraped a humongous amount of like recipes and just like chucked it in like a I think like a MongoDB or something for them to build an app against. And yeah, it was a it took a while, I'm not gonna lie. Yeah.
So what's just happened here is I put in a URL into content block. The web scraper is again just the code executor. So this is a web scraper that I wrote sort of earlier today. So it's just using Beautiful Soup, which is a common parsing library for Python and Selenium, Firefox. So it's nothing sort of too fancy. It's just returning the HTML. So then this is basically passing that HTML into GPT-4 and getting it to format it. So in this case, it's given me a whole lot of stuff.
Hmm.
Just the recipe.
Nice.
Sometimes it needs some persuasion.
Okay, and so the code runner. So did you write the actual code yourself, or did you, in terms of by prose, type out what it should do and it wrote the code?
So in this case, sorry, I'm trying to find the tab that actually has video. In this case, I had written that code previously, so I reused that. I actually turned that that particular code runner block into a template. So a template is something that you can then reuse across canvases.
Yes.
So it's like a snippet that you can just
Yeah.
kind of bring in. So I just tweaked that slightly.
Yeah, and like only Python at this point, or does it support like Node or?
At the moment, it's only Python, but that's a totally arbitrary decision because that's what I'm familiar with, and I implemented it really quickly. It's still sort of an alpha thing, but yeah, we have discussed making it able to actually use a CLI interface into what you wanted to execute, which would allow you to execute any application that could be run from a command line or any code, which I think could be quite interesting.
Yeah, there's some interesting stuff happening now within the WASM space as well, where you can spin up like an entire code environment. Chances are you guys are probably already looking at something like that.
Trying not to, but yeah.
Yeah, it's a rabbit hole. Yeah, cool. Then I have some questions around the actual tech stack. So, so obviously, yeah, like I mentioned, like React Flow. You did mention, Alex, you mentioned like you're kind of doing some React work. Did you guys start out with React, or did you start out with something else?
We started with React. It's just the kind of language I'm familiar with, and
yeah, and it's like I actually think it's going to be a very boring discussion, like for me delving into that decision, because like kind of React's kind of at that point where it's like that classic line about nobody gets fired for choosing IBM, like no one gets fired for choosing React kind of at this point. So yeah, okay, and I'm also curious just from a actual development and kind of front end perspective, whether there was anything that was surprisingly challenging in terms of like just the actual product in the browser that you're building.
I mean, there's no end to that answer. I mean, everything, it's like that classic line, we did this not because it was easy, but because we thought
it was going to be easy.
Like, that's I think that applies to I mean the startup's great friend is the Dunning-Kruger effect, where you overestimate your competency at everything. But I think that happy for Ross and Alex to jump in here, but something that's always a challenge is just making something feel good. And you mentioned React Flow, and like it's been it's been great for us. We use it, and we're very grateful that it exists. So this is not dissing React Flow, but it's like at all. But obviously like making everything feel good with zooming in and zooming out, and then when you have like really complex, those blocks look simple, but there's so much complexity, there's so much interactivity in them. When you're zooming out on them, and then they're selected, and then they're in edit mode and stuff. It's like there's just so many. It's like such a huge combination of states to design and to implement, to test, to make sure it feels good. And then you've got to do that when there's like 200,000 tokens worth of information as well. So you're going to need to manage that and not pull that into the front end. I mean, there's so much of that stuff that's challenging. We're busy right now. I don't know if we want to talk about it, the RTE stuff. I mean,
Ooh.
it's just
Like this is the big announcement right here. This is why everyone came.
honestly, there's nothing to announce yet because this is so difficult. You're asking what's difficult. This is difficult. It's like getting like a rich text editor working.
Yes.
Is really, really challenging, and it's just been weeks. It's just weeks and weeks and weeks of grinding. Alex, blink twice if you want me to continue talking about this. This is like, yeah. So I don't know. Those are two of the things that really come to mind. But feel free, Ross, Alex, to jump in with other stuff.
Yeah. But that kind of echoes my experience as well. Is and this is why I'm so kind of like I don't want to say captivated, but why like I'm actually enjoying what you guys are showing me so much, because I'm also very much in the UI engineering space and stuff as well. And like I think what a lot of people don't realize is because of the abstractions we have nowadays, so you mentioned like React Flow and so forth, it's very easy to get really complex things like up and running very quickly, as long as you kind of generally fit within their intended use. The moment you start building something weird or combining these tools, so once again, like rich text editing, creating a node-based thing, like having some type of asynchronous thing going on, where one thing depends on the other thing. And so these things are not that hard individually. But it's like when you combine them in very weird and strange ways, now all of a sudden it's almost impossible to do rich text editing, And I think that's also like, and once again, like this isn't, as you mentioned, this isn't like I think if anything, it's to the credit of something like React Flow that something that I worked on as well. We were really like pushing it well beyond what it was actually intended to be used for. And I'd probably say you guys are also pushing it a bit beyond. It's probably more used for representing like graph-based data and not actually as a means to control something. As control knobs and stuff. So it's the same as well. And I think it's SVG, right? So yeah, we also did some weird stuff where it was like we had like a little like kind of web like box inside the SVG, and then we embedded stuff in there. Yeah, it gets crazy. I can 100% sympathize with that.
Yeah. Like yeah, I mean 100%. And I think that's like a little bit of our the kind of curse that we have brought upon ourselves, is that like we have sort of strong opinions of how we want some interactions to work, and when it isn't quite right, and it's not to say that everything in the product is perfect and is exactly the way that we want it, yet we always have to make these like trade-offs and stuff, but like we probably are a little more like there's some things that we really want to work a certain way, and like we sometimes need to like brutalize the existing like tools and frameworks to get that done. And like we were actually just talking earlier today, the three of us, about we chose Mantine as a component library. We really liked Radix. There's a bunch of we spent some time like really evaluating a bunch of them, and Mantine was just like more composable, and like we knew we could get to the kinds of interactions that we wanted. But like to get to that point takes quite a lot of, like, Alex is really experienced now, kind of having worked with React and worked with so many libraries for like so long. I'm singing your praise. I know this is like the number one thing that is like Alex uncomfortable.
He's a big boy now.
you can see like we're like in like a few months time or a year's time or whatever, this is gonna like, we're gonna want to do something, and like we're not gonna be able to do it if we choose this library. Sorry, Alex. I'll shut up now.
Yeah, no, but it's interesting because even just like in a regular like CRUD, as I mentioned, basic CRUD SaaS app, like those are like you're already drowning in choices. Like as you mentioned, Vantine, Radix, Material UI, Ant Design, So now, like, and those, it's all like, yeah, like now you're just working within the realm of a path that have been treaded by 5 million people before you, and it's still hard, like just figuring out like how to connect all the things. I have admiration and sympathy for you guys at the same time. Yeah. Are you guys doing any type of like local data, or is it all just like everything through, like, I assume it's just REST calls? There's probably, I guess, some server in the middle that kind of interfaces with the models, their endpoints.
We use REST for a lot of our calls, but we also have WebSockets as well at the same time to kind of unify processes, because some of them take a long time to get done, and so we get updated via WebSockets as well. REST, and then on the client side we use Zustand for a lot of the client side libraries, which I've really enjoyed. And I think with, like, as far as the front ends libraries are concerned, we've tried to make choices that we pick a library that's one of the best in class, sometimes not the nicest one out of the box, but we try to pick ones that are composable, because we know we're going to want to change things. And so that's probably been one of the key guidelines in picking a library, is like, how much flexibility do we get with changing some of the behavior? And to React Flow's credit, I mean, it took me a while, but I think it's pretty good at that. Zustand is an amazing client-side store for that stuff.
Agreed. Yeah.
And I use Jotai as well for like a ton of updates.
Yeah.
Actually, I have a question for Alex, if he doesn't mind me asking. So someone I didn't mention earlier who's joined the team recently is Jude, also like a predominantly front-end engineer. And like, to what degree do you consciously think of like how learnable things are, or how likely other engineers are to like already know about frameworks when you evaluate them, Alex?
It's a hard question. I don't know. I try to write the code simply, so that it's quite dumb, so that it's quite easy to understand. But like, I mean, we'd have to ask Jude as well. He might not agree. I pick libraries that try to be well documented anyway and are quite simple. Generally we try to go that way, unless we can. So a lot of the stuff we pick are common. React Flow is very used. Mantine, Jotai, Zustand. These are all, like, we try not to pick obscure libraries that reinvent the wheel, I guess, because our core focus is building a good UI and UX, and not necessarily like cutting edge technology sometimes.
But and I mean, that's an entire presentation on its own, because like I often find myself at that intersection where, I assume, just purely based on the product, the type of thing that you guys are building right now, and how much of that knowledge by definition like has to be internal institutionalized knowledge, and like if Alex were to say tomorrow, I'm done, like I'm fed up, like that would leave you guys in a predicament. But the flip side of that is like kind of compromising in terms of the quality. And like, yes, man, I find myself so much at that intersection as someone who's also kind of sometimes also, but like in a team lead position, is like, and I'm curious whether that is something that you guys think about at all, is how scalable is what you guys are building in terms of bringing other people on board to help out with it, and onboarding them. And do you make, it's such a hard thing, like, do you make compromises in terms of, okay, we can build this thing that's really cool and it's going to be amazing, but basically only Alex is going to be able to do it, and only he's going to know what's going on there. And like if he's no longer here one day, then we're screwed. Like do those type of, because I have them myself, and with teams that I'm part of, yeah. I'm curious whether that's something you guys have like thought about or discussed at all.
Alex, you want to take that? I'm happy to take that.
I mean, I don't know if I can do the answer justice. From my context, I think we try to always build in quite a modular fashion, at least theoretically. I don't know if we always get that right. So a lot of the complexity, I don't know, in front end is around the kind of product we build. It is really around the interaction, the expected user interaction, and what about all the edge cases, and so to attempt to build that in a modular fashion, so that logic and that flow is contained and self-contained, and so you only really need to understand the nuts and bolts when you dive really deep, and then to have these kind of more and more abstract constructs that allow someone going in to understand the high level quite easily, and then if they want to go one level deeper. So I think that's generally from the front end how I've tried to build it, but not always the case when we're doing rapid prototyping as well. Things get messy, and you got to refactor after the fact, because sometimes you don't know what you're building. So it's about refactoring and cleaning that code base up.
And there's also this concept of I think it's from Out of the Target, which is like this idea of just inherent complexity. Like there's just like the thing that you guys are building is just inherently complex without even if there's no code involved. Even if you were to decide that we're gonna just do this with pen and paper or whatever, like before even the complexity of software come in, the actual thing you're doing is really complex. So like it's interesting. I'm just curious because I often feel that doesn't get like discussed enough, and when it gets discussed, no one is willing to admit that they are actually sometimes making their product not as amazing as it can be, because you need to think about, is someone going to be able to maintain this, regardless if the guy who's currently doing it is a superhero. If you can't get someone at that level, or you can't scale that, if you can't get 10 Supermen, front-end Supermen, then like where does that leave you? I'm curious to hear what your experience has been with Jotai. I really like it, but it feels like one of those things that should be a lot more popular than it actually is.
I think it's great. I like, it's helped with really small pieces of sharing state that I want, because one of the problems with like a complex React project is rendering and performance, and so I think like being able to not do prop drilling and stuff, and share that state in discrete components there, that's simplification, and I think it's a must have something like that. I mean, there was a Facebook one that I as well
Recoil.
A long time ago. Yeah, Recoil. But I'm super happy with Jotai and Zustan.
Yeah, it's the same guy who does Zustan, right? Yes.
Dashi.
Yeah. It's like it's always blown my mind that it's not like that popular. Like if you were to mention it, it's probably people listening now who's like, they know Zustan, but they have no idea what that Jotai thing is. But yeah. Okay,
well,
cool.
Skull, I just wanted to add something about the complexity thing that you're talking about, because where we've kind of explicitly thought about it in the past is that you can either you can only move complexity around, and you can't sort of destroy it beyond that sort of irreducible amount. And I think that what a lot of one strategy is to move actually a lot of it outside the boundary of the system towards the user, where where it's sort of complex for the user to do. So I mean, for example, like the choice of like, do we allow people to put in their own API keys or not? And obviously, if we just allowed people to put in their API keys and we didn't offer any API access or whatever, that would be the simplest thing for us. But like that will also mean it'll be harder for people. It's just like an extra barrier, extra piece of complexity for a user to deal with when they get up and running with the product.
Yes.
But by the same token, supporting both is like either ours or their API keys is additional complexity. So that's something where we've kind of had to draw the line, at least for now, where we said like we're just not gonna do one thing to make it simpler for the users, and then like, but we're not gonna absorb all the complexity. We're gonna like limit the amount of complexity in the system. But the other thing that we've talked about explicitly is kind of where to move complexity around between the front end, between the back end, and like in some of the choices that we've made, we've explicitly thought about the fact that we're going to want to scale the team at some point. And so it's not even about like, is Alex the only person in the world who can do this? It's more like, well, we know we want to have more backend and full stack engineers at some point as well. So do we choose to build the system in Go or in Python? And that's one of the reasons why we chose Python, even though we like Go as well, is because there's more Python developers. There are other reasons too. There's more Python, kind of like there's just more ecosystem support around AI for Python and stuff. So that's not the only reason, but that's another. And the other kind of thing that's top of mind for how we think about complexity and where to put it is speed of iteration. So we, that's really like we move really quickly, and we build, test, deploy features, with the exception of the rich text editor, really quickly, and that's like how we kind of think about where to put different pieces of code, and like how to like. Like just how to architect the internals of the system is for complexity, like for the speed of execution as well, like speed of iteration and speed at which we can get new people up and running on it.
Yeah. No, I also appreciate your kind of like candidness like around it. Like as mentioned, like it's sometimes hard for people to admit that there are trade-offs. So like it's always just refreshing when people have honest conversations about like, these are the realities of building software. Sometimes you need to decide, like sometimes you just can't have everything in rainbows and sunshine and whatever. I see Dave, I see you shared this, which is the tech stack, which apparently I assume Grammarly or whatever thinks there's a ton of spelling mistakes here. So
that's true.
Okay, cool. I'm curious. So looking at this like immediately, the one of the immediate things I'm curious about is so the Vite React thing, was that a deliberate decision over something like a Next or Remix or so forth?
At the time when I tried them, I just really enjoyed Vite, and I found it very simple and fast to use during development. So
okay, yeah, and like it's also like I'm not sure how much of a case there is for things like server-side rendering and so forth, and what you guys are doing.
It has been a debate. There are some elements of what our product we would like to make server-side, but most of the product on the canvas and stuff, I think, serve the right purpose to be a client-side app.
Cool. And the GitHub actions, are they kind of related to testing, deployment, and those type of things?
Yeah, primarily on the back end. So we've got quite a lot of as many automated checks and tests as we can on the back end. It's more difficult on the front end, obviously.
Yes.
But yeah, I think that's the kind of CI pipeline has put us in quite a good position. I mean, we deploy to production multiple times a day. So yeah, that stuff's really useful for us.
Do you guys use like vtest or Jest or any of those like kind of unit testing stuff on the front end?
I mean, I can answer no for Alex, but I don't know if you want to say more than no.
Alex is the test runner. Is that a deliberate decision, or is it just like there's only so many hours in a day at this point?
Yeah, I think it was one of the compromises, and I don't know. I think it's testing, but testing on the front is a really complex topic, and there's so many different layers.
Yes.
So I think yeah, we haven't got anything. We've talked a bunch about implementing. We definitely want to put some stuff in. We want to do some smoke tests, and we'll use probably like Playwright for that. I've really enjoyed. I used to have Storybook in the previous project, so we'll put Storybook and Chromatic for like visual diffing was a really nice like top layer to. And it didn't require a lot of work, but I found like testing individual components sometimes it hinders the stage we're in the sense of like the speed of iteration that Dave talks about. Any testing on top of it is something that has to be managed and breaks. And the question is just like what testing to put in where. I think there's a very good use case for like visual diffing for functional tests, on complex functions on the front end, but it's always been a bit of an uncertainty around like component testing and those middle layers.
I tend to agree. I tend to, when it comes to things like VTest, Jest, Cypress, those type of things, I tend to oscillate a bit. I'm currently at the point where I'm mostly just like, Storybook is enough. Because I think like what tends to happen with myself is I tend to be like, I should probably be a real developer now and actually do like test-driven development, and then I'm like and I have this period where I'm like, oh cool, okay, cool, and then at some point it's just like things get so brittle and whatever, and you're like, oh man, like why do like this was such a wasted hour now writing a test, like what is even the like I get what you're saying, like testing UI is hard because a UI itself is a side effect. And then tests are really nice when you have deterministic behavior, but a user actually interacting with your interface is a side effect, and so you're effectively testing side effects, which like is So no, I agree, but Storybook is kind of the one that I nowadays just like to regard as, but I think it's also because it's such a part of my process, and I also think because you guys, I assume, have such a tight loop in terms of talking to backend and whatever. And some of the work that I do, there's a much longer loop between like contracts between the backend and front end getting finalized and whatever. So something like Storybook like really helps kind of make progress, even if those things aren't known, to kind of just mock some stuff to start building. And then at the end, like when the stuff comes in, you actually have something that's testable. But okay.
I think it's something absolutely we're going to have to put in for stability. We just debate when that is exactly.
And that's a valid thing as well, okay, really cool. Like I think that's mostly it from my side. This is really great. Thanks so much, guys, and also thanks so much for just like being so honest and open about kind of, like I think in this type of space, people are very guarded and they don't want to share too much. I think we lost to David.
Gone.
So rude. Okay. I would. Okay. No, he's back again. You're so rude.
I don't know what happened there.
So rude. Like, okay. At least wait for me to just like say goodbye. I was really like, okay, I think we can start. I think we can start ending this off, and he's just like, leave. Like this is really cool, guys. I appreciate it, and I also appreciate kind of like just how open you guys were about like decisions you made and so forth. Especially in this type of space where people tend to be very guarded, and because it's such a developing space, you're so scared that like someone's going to steal your idea or whatever. Like I really appreciate that. I don't know if there's anything you guys want to mention or show or ask me or so forth before we start ending off?
I think the main thing is that anyone who's watching this and who's curious about the product and would like to give it a try, feel free to email us at founders@hunch.tools. Like I said, it's in private beta, but if you email us, like basically now, we'll just like cut you to the front of the line. And we'd love your feedback in how you're using the product, sort of like some of the rough edges that you're finding that you think would be kind of useful if they were smoothed over, any other functionality that you think would be really great. Let us know. We're here, and we aren't hiring at the moment, but I think we will soon. So feel free to just reach out to us and connect. We're around.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Thanks so much, guys. And I don't know what the time is over there in San Francisco. Probably like have a nice afternoon.
Yeah.
Alex and Ross, you guys should have a nice evening.
Thanks.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks very much.
Bye.